$5,000 check to every American or every American taxpayer. Sounds too good to be true, right? Well, that's exactly what people are calling the Doge dividends, an idea floating around that the US government could redistribute savings from budget cuts back to taxpayers. But before you start planning what to do with that extra cash, let's break this down a bit. Where is this money coming from? And how realistic is this actually? And whether this is just another political stunt. But before we dive in, if you're new here, my name is Chika and I've spent the last few years studying financial systems and investment strategies while working in some of the biggest financial institutions. And my goal with this channel is simple: to help you understand money the way the rich does, so you can start building your very own version of financial freedom. So if that sounds good to be true, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. Now let's get into it. Okay. First things first, let's clear up some misconception. This has nothing to do with Dogecoin, so no one is sending you cryptocurrencies and Elon Musk isn't handing out free money. The Doge dividend comes from something called the Department of Government Efficiency, known as Doge, and it's not an official government agency, but rather a task force set up to identify and eliminate wasteful government spending. The idea is simple: instead of government keeping all the savings from cutting waste, a portion of that money could be redistributed to taxpayers as a refund. And this all started when James Fishback, the CEO of an investment firm, posted a proposal on X suggesting that 20% of these savings should be sent back to taxpayers. And that would mean $5,000 per household. Elon Musk saw this post, responded, and he said he would check in with Trump. Then Trump addressed it publicly, and once that happened, the media ran with the story, fueling speculations that this could actually happen. But here's the thing: just because something goes viral doesn't mean it's real. The numbers sound great on paper, but there is a massive gap between a social media idea and an actual government policy. And before anyone gets too excited, we need to take a closer look at whether this even makes sense financially. Let's look into the numbers. Doge claimed to have already saved $55 billion by cutting fraudulent programs, canceling unnecessary contracts, and reducing government workforce expenses. Sounds like a lot, right? But here's where things start to fall apart. That $5,000 check people are talking about is based on the assumption that Doge will eventually save $2 trillion. That number is being thrown around to justify this payout. But the problem is that number doesn't exist yet. Even Elon himself admitted that that $2 trillion is just a best case scenario. So right now, independent audits suggest that the actual savings might be closer to 8.6 billion and not 55 billion. And that's definitely nowhere near 2 trillion. And even if we take the official 55 billion savings at face value, only 20% of that will be allocated to taxpayers under this proposal. That would mean 11 billion will be available for redistribution. Well, if you spread that across 78 million tax-paying households, you are looking at a one-time payment of about $140 per household, not 5,000. And even if Doge somehow manages to hit that $2 trillion goals, the amount being set aside for taxpayers would be around 400 billion. Divide that by 78 million tax-paying households, and yes, you do get that magical $5,000 per household. But then again, that's assuming that those massive savings actually happen, which at this point is just wishful thinking. Okay, even if the math checks out, right, there's still the question of whether this proposal could ever get approved. And that's where things tend to fall apart even more. Let's talk about why this wouldn't happen anytime soon. Even if Doge somehow manages to save $2 trillion, and even if $400 billion is set aside for taxpayers, there's still one major problem. This will need to pass Congress, and that's where things start to fall apart even more. For this to become reality, it would require approval from both the House of Representatives and of the Senate. And right now, the Republicans control the House, but by a slim margin. Democrats control the Senate, and They are not going to sign off on a plan that cuts spendings from government programs that they supported just to send out tax refunds. And even within the Republican Party, there are fiscal conservatives who would reject this outrightly, arguing that this fund should go towards reducing the national debt instead. And there's the problem of inflation. Every time the government injects large amounts of money into the economy, prices go up. We saw this after the COVID-19 stimulus check, where trillions of government spendings contributed to the highest inflation rate in over 40 years. And according to an MIT study, about 42% of the inflation spike in early 2022 was directly tied to stimulus payments. Now, some has argued that this wouldn't be an inflationary measure because the government is not printing new money and it's not new government spending. It's just redistributing savings. But that ignores the key issue, right? Even though this wouldn't involve printing more money, injecting 400 billion into American households overnight could still create a massive amount of demand. More money chasing the same amount of goods would mean prices go up. The Federal Reserve has spent years trying to cool down inflation, and the last thing they want is another spending surge that undoes everything they've done. And guys, let's be real. When was the last time Washington saved money and actually gave it back to the people? If anything, Congress is more likely to use those savings to fund other programs, expand government initiatives, and reduce the deficit rather than sending out direct checks. So when you look at the big picture, this has almost no chance of passing. Even if Congress agrees on the idea, the inflation risk alone would make it politically toxic. So if you are expecting a $5,000 check in your bank account, don't hold your breath. But that doesn't mean that the idea is completely dead. Let's talk about what's more likely to happen instead. Even though a $5,000 check is unlikely, that doesn't mean there won't be some kind of tax relief or financial benefit tied to this government savings. It just wouldn't come in the way most people are expecting. And the most realistic outcome is a targeted tax rebate or credit instead of a direct check. If the government actually follows through on these spending cuts, it's far more likely that these savings would be used to reduce your tax liabilities rather than handing out lump sum of money to people. That means instead of getting $5,000 in cash, taxpayers could see a tax credit that lowers what they owe in the future. And that would be much easier to pass in Congress because it wouldn't be seen as free money, but rather tax relief. Another possibility is that these savings could actually go towards reducing the national debt. A big part of this proposal suggests that a portion of the money should be used to bring down the government borrowing. And while that doesn't actually put cash in people's pocket, it could actually help stabilize the economy, stabilize interest rates, which means you can make borrowing much more cheaper for things like homes, cars, even business investments. And there's also a chance that instead of getting a one-time payment, some of these savings could be redirected into long-term tax cuts. See, if Trump or any future administration pushes for broader tax reform, the money saved from cutting waste could actually be used to offset some tax rate reduction, particularly for middle class and high income earners. The only problem is that those benefits won't feel as immediate as cash hitting your bank account. So what should you actually take away from all of this? Well, let's wrap this up. So will you be getting a $5,000 refund check anytime soon? Probably not. Yes, cutting government waste is a good thing. And yes, Trump and Elon Musk discussing tax relief is interesting. But unless Congress agrees and those $2 trillion magically appears from nowhere, this idea is nothing more than a political talking point. And if you actually want to boost your finances, don't wait on Washington. Invest wisely, cut on your own wasteful spending, increase your income stream, and build wealth the way the rich does. Because relying on government handout is never a solid financial plan. So what do you think? Should the government give back some of these savings, or is this just another empty promise? Well, let me know in the comments. And if you want no BS financial content, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.